reviews, discussions, and theories about films in horror, sci-fi, and genre. This is The Horror Deconstruction. Like, share, and subscribe to hear more.
What's up, everybody? It's The Horror Deconstruction. You can find us on Instagram, Facebook, most likely on YouTube. Give us a like, share, and subscribe. Hit that bell icon, hit that thumbs up. Let the people know you listen to the show with your host, Komp and
Thea.
Today's episode is
Pearl 2022.
Pearl 2022. In 1918, a young woman on the brink of madness pursues stardom in a desperate attempt to escape the drudgery, isolation, and lovelessness of life on her parents' farm. Directed and written by Ty West and Mia Goth. Well, Mia Goth didn't do the directing, but she did camera work on it. Starring Mia Goth, David Corenswet, and Tandy Wright, and a whole bunch of other people. So, Thea, why did we do Pearl?
Because we did X.
That's
so we
true.
might as well do Pearl.
That's true. Were you on the X episode?
I don't think I was.
Yeah,
I think
right.
you guys did that one without me.
That's
but
kinda why, like,
I've seen X.
I originally had Danny, but he's mentally checked out. He's quit the show, people. I'm sorry. No, he didn't quit the show. Yeah, so I think, obviously, people know. I didn't realize this X came out in 2022 as well, right? Came earlier in the year? I thought it came out in 2022.
Yeah, well, they shot them back to back, basically, and then released them in the same year.
Honestly, you
cool.
wouldn't even know, like, by the tone and the look of both films.
Very different.
And I think, honestly, it might be Ty West's best film. just how it's made. You know, I might kind of need to work through how it is in general as a film after. But why don't you give us the general breakdown of what Pearl is about?
Pearl is basically the backstory to the villain in X. So it's sort of her when she was young and in 1918. And living with her parents and her ailing father and having to sort of help take care of the farm and her dad and rebelling against her mother and trying to be a star.
And this is a time during, I assume this is World War, not II, this is World War I.
Yes, and during a flu pandemic, which is funny to see people
I guess
like
it's very
wearing
timely.
masks in the similar way.
I wonder if that was an afterthought or... Nah, I'm sure Ty West had that all in mind before.
Yeah.
So, in World War I, we fought Germans, right? Again, so
both wars, yes.
Yes. I guess in World War III, we'll see if they're up to it. So obviously, just to what did you, since you weren't on the X episode, what were your thoughts on X itself?
I liked X. It's not necessarily my flavor of movie, but Ty West always does a really good job of like time period.
Yes.
Of which 70s is just not my favorite. So
Same.
It was well done. It just wasn't my thing. But it was still like a solid movie, but it wasn't like something that I'm running to rewatch.
Apparently
to
a lot of people, 70s were like the most the defining era of film and cinema because it was like bad times. You know what I mean? So this was like
and super experimental and like pretty revolutionary in a lot of ways. It's just not my favorite because I like the frivolity of the 80s.
Yeah, it's weird because it's like in the 70s, like you get The Godfather, you get all these like you get some pretty heavy hitter films, and and we're still as anybody who watches film are still watching the resonating ideas of those films from back then because they weren't like happy endings. Like I listen to Tarantino stuff. Like Tarantino, I think Tarantino's a great director, but obviously he's like mad about superhero movies, or whatever. And I'm like, there's other movies being made, But he's talking about how 70s were basically the greatest era of film, but then the 80s kind of made everything happy. And I understand what he's saying. Like in the 80s, like everything needed to have a happy ending because you don't want to be bummed out. Because in the 70s, everything was a little bit more. There was a war going on, you know what I mean? The war was basically wrapping up with the Vietnam War and, coming back home and people were getting fucked over. And so there was always this really depressing sort of finale where every movie was like played it straight and then the lead character would get fucked in some way. So the thing about like X fills that. And X obviously took some of its DNA from the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. That's what I always heard, like, oh, it's like the new Texas Chainsaw. I was like, not really. To me, it wasn't really anything like the Texas Chainsaw Massacre besides setting. Other than that, it's essentially like an 80s slasher film, but it's a slasher film where the slashing, you have a lot of, fattening up at the beginning.
A lot of setup.
Right, a lot of setup.
Yeah.
And, it gets into its deal like in the last 20 or 30 minutes of the movie. You know what I mean? So it's like one of those type of horror films where you're doing a lot of setup, and this is the same because this film takes an hour for the first person to get literally killed in the movie. And it's more. I think it's like a more of a character piece. It still rings a little bit hollow, honestly, to me. But I think it's well done enough, and I think Mia Goth is like fucking incredible in this movie. Like she was good in the first one. I couldn't get past the makeup stuff of the old lady.
Yeah,
stuff.
she didn't get as much. I mean, I guess she gets screen time because there's two characters, but it just doesn't have as much because the first film is so. It's more of an ensemble piece.
Right.
This one is so focused on one character that at least that way I felt a little bit more compelled by like the actual story.
Yeah, I think the positives about this film is like, because I know we had recently just done Terrifier 2. And I was like, and there's I think there was a pretty much consensus that Art is a pretty effective, like, bad guy in that movie.
Yeah, that's the reason to see it.
Like, if you see him, you'd be like, holy fuck, like, he's very disturbing. And I actually kind of felt that way about, the character Pearl in this. Like, I was like, I was worried for Pearl, the lady, Mia Goth's, like, blood pressure from making this movie because she...
Yeah.
There's something about this character or in the performance that Mia Goth does that when she, like, goes totally crazy or like when she's like losing her patience and she just gets angry that it's like scary to
me. And her eyes bulge kind of.
Yeah, and she just looks and it's scary. And I don't know if how you took it. Like I don't know if you think it's just too gimmicky. Like she just goes from 1 to 100 pretty quickly. But like I was like Jesus Christ. Like if I was in a room with somebody like that, I'd be like, get out of it.
It's scary.
It's very scary just how.
Yeah.
And there's people like that in real life. You can see plenty of viral videos of people freaking out like this, but this is like a freaking out on another level where it's just like this shit is frightening. Like if somebody accosted me like that, it's kind of like surface level. Oh, why don't you like me anymore? What did I do? It's sort of like, oh, okay, whatever. But the way that the at least the level of intensity that Mia Goth brings to it is like scary at least. And I was like, well, shit, she's as scary as Art to me is when she does that. Like if you just saw a regular in the street, you'd probably just pass her by. But I liked that she was crazy. But it seems to me that you're having a little bit of a disconnect between the character and the film itself. Was there something that what is something that didn't work for you with this movie?
I mean, I was pretty on board for the ride. Like we know where the story is heading. We know where she ends up. We know that she ends up staying there forever. Seeing the fall is hard. Like the screaming at them on stage is a bit cringy, but also effective. The part that didn't work for me was the 10-minute monologue that felt totally unnecessary.
Yeah, it's weird because people were on Twitter saying she needs an Oscar. Look at this 10-minute, and I finally get to the scene, and I'm like, it's not like usually with a monologue.
It's too long.
Honestly, I didn't pay attention. Like it kind of went fast for me myself. But I don't feel like it conveyed anything to me. Like I don't feel like because like when you get a monologue in a film or a play or something, you learn a lot about somebody. You learn a lot about a character. You learn a lot about their ideas and their goals, and you get a surface level version of that in this. But I didn't feel like it was like something to go crazy about. Like I thought her acting of it was great. But people were treating it like it was like a master class in writing, and I think monologue is like 50% like writing and an actor doing their performance. You know what I mean? So I wasn't like crazy about that. Like, and it sounds like I'm shitting on this movie, and I'm not actually enjoyed the film. But I completely get what you're saying that it was just like, oh, that's it. Like it's 10 minutes. Like she's just basically recapping the film.
It's also the shooting of it. It's like it's uninterrupted. We're focused on her for the entire thing. We don't get a reaction from the other actor in the room, which could be more effective in us feeling unsettled. I
felt the same way. Yeah, I get what you're saying. It felt like I think Ty West was filming it, and he's like, "Oh, this is it. This is my big moment in this movie." You know what I mean? Like, this is I'm just gonna hold it on her, and her acting is so strong that nobody will.
Yeah.
And I was like, it was sort of like I was waiting for the other person's face to show up on the screen because it was just like, okay, she's at like a 3/4 medium shot.
I was like, no reaction.
I could understand if that shot started, if the shot was like a 2 shot from far away, and the camera just kept getting closer and closer. That way you can make that shot more interesting. But it was basically like a stock shot from her. This is me thinking of another thing, but I'm saying like if you had made that visual a little bit more interesting, if the fucking lights turned out behind or something to make it more interesting. For this, it just seems like, hey, you could cut this fucking shot out of the movie. That's what it felt like to me. So I you know, that's just my thing. Well,
it's also just like one of those things where we can sit in a monologue for a little bit, but it totally slows down the pacing of the entire movie, and it would probably be much more effective to have a condensed version of that speech, which is diminishing returns.
Right.
And then cut to the other actor being like, what the fuck? Because that's like what it felt like they should have been going for.
Right.
But then we had to wait an extra like 8 minutes for it.
Yeah, because it feels like this movie, I don't know whether it moves slow for most people. I don't know if the movie felt slow for you for the first hour of the film. I didn't necessarily think it moved too slow. I don't know. I think I might have watched the movie like in 2 sittings, so that might have been why it didn't feel so slow to me. But like once it hits that hour mark, and you know things have picked up, so you're like, okay, now it's gonna be like a bloodbath slasher film, and then it goes to that 10 minutes. You're like, what's this about again? You know what I mean? It's like, oh, what happened here? So I can see, you know, a big divide, but for the most part, a lot of people enjoy that about this movie.
Yeah.
The thing I will say also is that I like that even though this is a prequel, it's not spoiling anything for X, and you don't have to watch X to watch this movie. My friend was gonna watch. He was like, "Oh, which one should I watch, Pearl or X?" And I was like, "I don't know if Pearl has, you know, any spoilers for X, but I like when I accidentally will watch a prequel before a regular film.
Yeah,
there's just something weird about it. You're like, oh, okay, cool, you know. But this you can literally watch either film. I think if you're into character work, you'd watch this second, and if you're into slashers, you'd watch X second. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Depending on what kind of film you want to see. Luckily, I'm fine with both. But I did like that there was it felt like its own movie, and it even had sort of that appropriate ending to itself, where it was just like a shocking ending. Like I'm trying to think of a movie that would be similar, that it sort of has just dead bodies at the end, and then it ends like with another character freaked out by it. There's hundreds of movies like that, I'm sure, in the 80s and the 70s. But speaking on Mia Goth's performance, what worked for you and what didn't work for you with this movie?
I think she did, I mean, as you said, like she did a really good job dialing up that character's jump to 10 anytime she sort of felt like insecure. I think for the most part, I did buy it. I think the most effective use of it was with the guy she sleeps with back at the farm.
The projectionist played by David Corns.
Yeah. I think that moment when she turns, I mean, he already knows something is wrong, but that really dials it in. And I think that was the most effective time she did that. I do think maybe doing it one less time through in the movie, like, it was hard to watch the one after the audition, and I get it.
Right. I wonder why people don't like. I wonder if people didn't know. Do people you think just don't know how to play it cool in real life situations like that? Because, like, you know, like if a person went to 100 on me like that, like they wouldn't know how to bullshit their way out of it.
No.
Yeah, I guess not, because I mean, in that situation, I'd be like, "What the fuck's wrong with you?" Like, I would do that, like, stupidly not.
I mean, it's very real, though. People do react like that in life.
Yeah, but
so it feels authentic. It just maybe it gets, because she does it so much in this movie. It's like it loses some of its edge as we go.
And I don't necessarily think the projectionist was a bad guy, honestly. I think,
no.
Because, I mean, it's a little bit questionable, like, when he puts on that actual real stag film in the movie. Because I was like, I remember seeing as a waiter, I've seen this clip somewhere before. Like, that's an actual stag. And I was surprised, like, of what they got away with. Like, maybe the film companies didn't know that was actual shit that was going on. Because I was like, wait a minute, there's, like, almost, like, you know, stuff that's happening on screen that I was like, that would be an X rating, but I guess in the 20s or whatever.
Yeah.
But he didn't seem like a bad guy. I thought that was a little bit like, obviously leading. He puts on a porn movie for her, so obviously he's trying to get with her, but he didn't.
He's trying to like titillate her,
right? But he didn't go any further than that, like, because usually,
he didn't. I'm so glad they didn't.
Yeah, in any other film, he would have started like rubbing her shoulders. I mean, they definitely the framing of it led to that idea. Because there's a part where she's looking out through the peak hole of the projection booth, and he's like right behind her, and you're like, oh, what's he gonna do? But he didn't.
Yeah.
So it was her that approached him with the affair. So I was like, okay.
Yeah.
So he wasn't like a complete piece of shit. The son of a bitch is more handsome than anything, also, which pissed me off. But
it's true.
anyway, so when he gets killed, and I was just like, and the part when he's walking up to his car, you just look behind you while you're walking, dude. Just.
Oh my god.
It was so obvious.
How did she sneak up on you?
I don't know. All these people, like, I understood the sister-in-law, who had like actually hypnotizing blue eyes. Like, I haven't seen eyes that blue in a long time in a movie, and I felt bad for her. And it also makes me feel very like conflicted of like Howard, who eventually comes later. Like, I can see maybe Howard. I guess Howard's a cuck, as you would say, because they didn't explain something that I thought they would explain would be the body in the basement in the first film. You know, there was like a guy chained up for like, I guess, sexual pleasure in the first movie. That who's that? The girl who plays Wednesday finds the body. But I thought, obviously that would have jumped like 50 years in time for that shot to make any sense. But I for some reason after this movie I can't get over the idea of him like letting his sister be killed and then be fine with that. Like, that to me is like a little. I mean,
he
might
not. Well, I guess he would make the connection eventually.
Yeah, because I mean, the mother would be like, "Have you seen where my, if you go into a room and your fiance or wife has, two dead her parents killed in obviously brutal fashion." Yeah, and then your sister vanished, and you're like, "Oh man, my sister left. I wonder. I wish she knew about this." What are you gonna?
Probably no connection.
Yeah, I mean that's a little strange, but and I thought Howard would be a little bit more of a character in this film, but I guess
like instrumental. Yeah, I kind of wanted him to show up more midpoint, maybe.
Yeah, because I thought that was the soldier walking through the field.
Help her hide it.
Yeah, I thought he was a soldier walking through the field, which is smart. It's another smart sort of idea of writing. I think that it wasn't him. But that I guess we won't get those answers of why he was so, maybe if he was in the war and saw weird shit enough that it fucked him up. But he looked pretty horrified at the end. Like, he really looked like scared.
Yeah, I mean, I even like, so for the credits sequence, just holding on her face as like in that fake smile, it's effective and interesting for, again, a shorter period of time than they held on it. I would have like been more pleased if they spent a little of that time just being like, it's Howard burying the bodies or throwing them into the lake with her,
like if there's some,
or something that, and maybe he like restrains her or something that goes like, oh, okay, I understand sort of how we get to the relationship they have in X.
Yeah, I think Ty West was going for money shots where he wanted like these really, when you like when you get previews for Blu-rays and they show you like a frame from a movie, I think he was doing that.
And it's like images you remember.
Yeah, and the thing is, that's how films usually work, honestly. If you're selling a film, you take a shot, but some of these were a little bit unnecessary. I like the gimmicky idea of it, but you make more sense in showing, if they had shown a montage towards the end, would have made more sense to like him, helping her out in her deeds, because Howard in the second film is a little bit more manlier. We don't know anything about Howard in this film, but he's manlier in the sense of like he's trying to defend his woman, and like he's willing to kill anybody because he thinks his wife is cheating on him, even though apparently he's open to it in the second film. And
it's hard to say.
And he is like he's a bit of an asshole in the second film, so like you get no idea of that in this one. But people obviously change from whatever age he was. I assume he's like 20 to 70 or 80 years old in the second film. So I think that was a missed opportunity with that. But I guess that wasn't the story that Ty West, because if you just add Howard, then it becomes a completely different film. Yeah,
which is absolutely fine. And we're focused on her, and it's a character study more than anything, and that's cool.
I thought Tandy Wright was great. Is that the mother who plays Ruth? She has this. She's a German farmer, and I guess her husband must have caught an illness. Matthew Sunderland has a good, easy job, but he's still pretty good in it as the father. Obviously, he I don't know what he had, but apparently he must have gotten ill with something that affected him greatly.
I think they had caught the Spanish flu on the other side of the ocean before they came.
Okay, so then that's
to the country. It was the idea.
Yeah, I'm not aware of what the Spanish flu does to you, but if that's what it does, that's pretty fucking awful. So Tandy Wright as the German mother, and she doesn't, and obviously she's old world, so her raising of Pearl, and she's just trying to protector, but it's sort of like an iron fist sort of protection of your
Yeah.
kids. I don't know, and it's weird because I'm always like, oh, why doesn't Pearl sort of have an accent like her mother? Because you would assume, if she's hidden somewhere else. But my dad has an accent, but I grew up without an accent.
Don't, yeah.
But that's because of my schooling and stuff. So I assume Pearl must have obviously went to a school that didn't, unless she was. You don't know. Whatever. Either way, her mother is obviously afraid of xenophobia, because they're Germans living in America while America's at war with Germany, and they're the fact that she wouldn't even take the pig, the food, the roasted pork. I don't understand why that is. So her mother obviously must have some sort of.
It's like a pride thing.
I guess
we don't want to accept help or whatever.
But I think it's I think it's a film that works for what it is, especially because X is like sort of a generic slasher movie. It's just that Ty West is so good with his framing of films. Like I liked The Innkeepers. I thought was fun. I wasn't a fan of The House of the Devil, but people love that movie. They think that's
really? I actually liked The House of the Devil better than Innkeepers.
Oh, okay, fair enough. Because I think I don't know what it was I didn't like about The House of the Devil. Like I didn't hate it, but I thought it was like it was literally like 20 minutes of her just walking around the house at one point, and I was like, all right, get over it. What the fuck's going on? I've seen what a house looks like. You can just walk through it. But his other films are hit or miss. Like I didn't like the remake of what was that, the one with the people that drank the Kool-Aid and died, or not Kool-Aid but whatever, the Jonestown Massacre film that he did. It was like I
didn't mind that one either.
So I mean, like Ty West certainly has a niche sort of type of film that he does. I think he's mostly just been in horror. He did one Western film, I think it was with John Travolta.
Right.
I didn't watch that. I'm not necessarily into Western films, but I think obviously he is very skilled director, and he talks about how he'd rather work with this sort of independent cinema than work on mainstream films because he doesn't have that much control, and it's working out for him. He's getting to make these films that are coming out. I don't think Pearl was as financially successful as X was, because X kind of came out of nowhere, where it made a lot of money. It was basically. X was basically Smile before Smile came out. It didn't make as much money as Smile, but because Smile kind of hits that note for generic audiences that like Blumhouse movies. But I think Pearl, which was probably more is probably more creatively fulfilling for him as a director, maybe, because it seems like he put a lot more into it, especially with the dance sequence. Although they didn't. Like, I liked the dance sequence, but there was something about it that was a little off. Like, it didn't feel completely genuine to me. I don't know if that makes any sense. But I still appreciated how it looked. So, and the theater scenes when she first comes in, everybody's all, like, in their, pre-World War II era clothing and stuff like that. I liked the feel of the movie. It felt weird. But it's not like an American Psycho where, well, to me, an American Psycho, when you watching that film, and obviously that movie owes a lot to its novel, of the wealth of material that's in that book that you can make, and plus Christian Bale, obviously, not to take away from Mia Goth's performance, but if you take like a main horror character as a protagonist, even if it's like Henry, Portrait of a Serial Killer, like those have a lot just from the performances themselves, and this character Pearl kind of wears it on her sleeves. She's sort of like a stock crazy girlfriend character.
It's less subtle. It probably could have done with a bit more subtlety in general in that character.
Yeah, because she's like, I think the most effective she is in the film at the beginning, when she's performing for her animals, and then she decides just to kill that duck or a goose at the beginning.
Yeah.
And I thought that was more like creepier, because it was like, it wasn't her yelling at somebody. It was just from a change from her mood. When she decided to kill,
very sudden point.
Yeah, which I thought was like, okay, now we're dealing with somebody fucked up, but then like the rest of the film, she just like goes batshit crazy. I thought it was fun. I felt like the actress was in fucking danger the way she was like going crazy in the movie. But I like the film itself. Like, is there any sort of final ideas that you felt about the movie that didn't work or did work?
I mean, I really enjoyed the style of it. Even more than the style of the first one.
Okay.
Because it felt so like like even that whole opening sequence where she's sort of going, we're opening on the farm and it's so idyllic, and they're going to her in the farmhouse, and it just felt very like Wizard of Oz to me.
Yeah,
so
right.
even with the title like font and everything,
Yeah.
that was fun. I had a good time watching it, even if I didn't like it. Sort of lost me in the back end, but it also had a beautiful sort of imagery throughout that I was just like, it's fun to watch either
Yeah,
way.
it's a very clean, very colorful type of film as opposed to the first movie, obviously I think it's dealing with the type of cinema it's portraying. Like obviously X is like a 70s grindhouse sort of dirty looking movie, and this one's it's supposed to look like, I guess, movies made in the 50s or 40s that dealt with eras of the early 1900s. So I think it's good in that way. I don't know if it has the same sort of visual flow as the original ones. They have the same look of it, but I don't think like, because back then everything was like camera movement that was like super fluid. Everything had this like almost like a
like dreamy.
Everything was very stagey. That's what I mean to say.
Yeah.
Like, everything looked like a stage. If perfect to compare to Wizard of Oz, because when you look at Wizard of Oz, it looks like you're walking through a dream, and this movie is a little bit more 80s looking than it is sort of 50s looking. But I think all in all, I think it works as a movie, as a character study, for as hollow as Pearl is. She's just basically somebody who's been looks like somebody who's been homeschooled or just has no life of their own other than to see it on the screen. But a rating I would give for it is obviously I think I would give it a 7 out of 10. I don't know. I think I might have given X a bigger number, maybe 7.5 out of 10. You know, fuck, I'll give it an 8 out of 10. I did like it. I didn't hate it. It sounds like I'm giving a very lukewarm review, but I did enjoy my time with it. And I think Mia Goth's performance really is standout in this movie. So we'll give it an 8 out of 10. Thinking about your lovely husband coming back from the war and exploding in the middle of the field because you just want to have some fun. Thea, what rating would you give Pearl 2022?
I'm gonna give it a 7 out of 10.
Fair enough.
And it's gonna be 7 out of 10, like aggressively first hitting and then making out with a scarecrow. Yeah, in the middle of a cornfield. Yeah. That was something.
A rare sequence of frottage in American cinema. So with that, Thea, what's the final word?
Run.